Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the cards from New Capenna that I'm excited about to test out in my own cube. Now rather than just doing another top 10 video, I thought I'd actually have a quick chat with everyone, have a proper discussion about the cards that I'm actually excited about and why, and also how I'm going to be cutting cards to make room for them. So for anyone who's new, I'll give you a quick overview on my own cube just so you kind of understand the lens that I'm looking at it through. My cube is a 540 unpowered vintage cube. That means there's 540 cards in it, with the aim that you can do an 8-player draft, and you're not guaranteed to see every card, so it's a little bit different every time you draft it. The unpowered vintage thing is basically meaning that I don't run any fast mana or any powered cards. There's still a lot of very broken stuff in here, but the lack of fast mana and the lack of 2-card combos in particular means that it allows mid-range decks to really work and flourish. When it comes to power level, the best way to describe it is that it's somewhere between a vintage cube and a legacy cube. So when it comes to looking at a new set for new cards, I am generally looking for the best things that I can run. One of the best things about being at the slightly larger cube size of 540 means I get to playtest a lot of new and cool cards. I put a list of the archetypes already in the cube on screen here, and I'll also put a link down to the cube in the description below. But don't let the power level of my cube put you off. Every card I'm going to be going over today isn't super expensive and has also just been printed. That's one of the nice things about putting cards in from a new set. So, probably the best place to start is with the new cycle of triomes. We have Spara's Headquarter, Rafine's Tower, Xander's Lounge, Ziadora's Proving Ground, and Jetmir's Garden. These complete the cycle of 3-colour lands that we got in Ikoria. I, like a lot of people, have been very impressed with these 3-colour lands. Because they have the basic land type, they really help with fixing, as you can go get them off a fetch land. And also, as lands decks are getting more popular in Cube, especially with the printing of Field of the Dead, a lot of cubes are looking for more non-basic lands to run. I think for the foreseeable future, these are going to be slam dunks in a lot of cubes that can run them, so I'm very excited to try them in mine. When it comes to finding cuts for these, my general thinking is I don't want to take away too many non-basic lands. I still want that number to be high for things like Field of the Dead. Basically, I've gone through my list and I'm cutting what I think is the worst card in each colour. In white, a Ganjo Seat of the Empire has been solid, but I have cards that do this effect better, and by swapping it out for another non-basic land, I'm not going down any. The same is true for Den of the Bugbear. I think it's a pretty solid card in an aristocrat or an aggressive deck, but one of the things with these value lands is that they eat up slots in the cube which can be replaced for new things. It's still a solid card and it offers a lot of flexibility, but I think it's just a bit too expensive for what it does. In black, it was a bit of an easy cut as these cards have underperformed quite a bit, and we're going to be cutting Pox. I tried to make this archetype work, and at this power level I just don't think it has. And then green pains me the most. I'm going to cut Rancor. The green aggressive decks don't really need it when things like Questing Beast just naturally exist. There is one caveat I will say to these new 3-colour lands, is that it could make multicoloured control decks a bit too strong. I know plenty of people who will just take fixing for the first pack and then play 3, 4, 5-colour good stuff. If these decks start getting too strong, I could see a world where I rein them back in and just play the ones that support some of the 3-colour strategies in the cube that I'm supporting. Moving over to blue, we have a card that I wasn't too excited about initially, but I just keep seeing it doing good things in loads of different formats, and that's Ledger Shredder. 1 blue for a 1/3 flyer is fine, but that ability, that whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, Ledger Shredder connives, I think is going to be really strong. I've been really lowering the mana value of the cube over the last year or so, to a point where a lot of players are going to be wanting to double spell in a turn, especially in the Spells Matter deck and maybe even the Control deck. Because you discard off of the connive trigger, I can also see it being run in a Reanimator deck. I think the fact I can see this going in multiple decks is what makes it go in. And generally speaking as well, if you see a card showing up in most formats that can play it, it's probably a good sign that you should give it a test. In terms of cuts, we're going to be cutting Malevolent Hermit from the cube. This card has been okay. I basically swapped it in as a cheaper version of Glenelendra, and while it does a fine impression of that, it's just not as strong. For the time being, I'm happy enough testing out a new card rather than putting Glenelendra straight back in, but give it a bit of time, it'll probably show up again. Moving over to black, we have another recursive threat, and that's Tenacious Underdog. A 2-mana 3/2 is pretty solid to begin with, and their blitz ability is going to be very nice. The black recursive creatures go into so many decks in this cube that basically I want to run all of them. They just do such a good job in any of the aggressive decks, and also have a lot of synergy with the aristocrat decks, as you can swing with them, then start sacking them, and then bring them back to ping out your opponents. When it comes to cuts, is one I'm a little sad to see go, and that's Blade of the Oni. Don't get me wrong, I think this card is super strong and really cool, and I really like it, but most of the time in my cube it's a 3/1 with Menace, which is very good, but Tenacious Underdog also has 3 power, and you can bring him back from the graveyard, and when you do, it'll draw you a card. I think maybe if I was going way more aggressive with mono black, with things like Carnivage, then Blade of the Oni would still be a slam dunk. But unfortunately, this is one of the problems with them printing cool cards every couple of months. Moving over to red, we have a card that I'm not 100% sure about, but I do want to give it a test, and that's Herbrask, Heretic, Prater. But at its base level, it's a 5 mana 4/4 with haste that gives you an extra bit of card advantage. The second ability is the weird one that I'm not sure about yet. It basically means they have to play the card they draw at the start of their turn on their turn, otherwise they lose it. I kind of like this in like a big red control-y kind of deck that comes down on turn 4 or 5 and gives you that extra little bit of time you need by mucking up your opponent's plans to finish them off. When it comes to cuts, we're going to be removing Emissary of Grudges, which if you haven't played with is a fantastic card. A 6 mana 6/5 flyer with haste is awesome, and that ability to muck a removal spell is really strong. But as I said earlier, I am trying to lower the mana curve of the cube, so cutting a 6-drop for a 5-drop is kind of where I want to be. Emissary of Grudges will definitely be back in my cube at some point, but if you haven't tried it yourself, give it a go. It is a super cheap card and is really fun. Moving over to green, we have another card that I'm not sure is as strong as the card I'm replacing it for, but it is a bit more interesting, and that's Titan of Industry. Titan of Industry is 7 mana for a 7/7 with Reach and Trample, so you can kind of already assume this is going to be in the big green deck. It has some cool utility when it enters the battlefield. It can either destroy an artifact or an enchantment, you can gain 5 life, you can create a 4/4 green Rhino, or you can put a shield counter on a creature that you control. This is all very big, very dumb, and very green. What I'm going to be replacing it for is Woodfall Primus. Again, it's 1 mana cheaper for a slightly bigger creature. It answers a lot of the same things that Woodfall Primus does, although not being able to hit lands could be important. If I'm honest, I'm hoping to be surprised by Titan of Industry. The fact that cards like Ephemerate and Soul Herder are already in the cube also makes Titan of Industry quite interesting. Moving over to some multicoloured permanents now, we're going to start with Azorius and we have Scheming Fence. It is a white and a blue for a 2/3 human citizen. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a non-land permanent. Activated abilities of the chosen permanent can't be activated. But fortunately, Scheming Fence has all activated abilities of the chosen permanent, except for loyalty abilities, but you can spend mana as though it were mana of any colour. This is basically a better Phyrexian Revoker. It can turn off a Planeswalker or a really busted creature. If you turn off the ability of a busted creature, then you get that ability yourself. I mean, Griselbrand is in my cube. Who doesn't want to be drawing 7 cards? I think this card is going to be a solid answer to a lot of things in the cube. The fact as well it could lead to some really interesting stories adds to me wanting to put it in and give it a test. In terms of cuts, we're going to be cutting Faithful Mending. Now I think this card is really solid, but the reason it's getting cut is that it's just a role player. It doesn't add an archetype or make an archetype better. That means it was always going to be on the chopping block in case anything more interesting comes along. That's one thing I like to keep with my gold sections. Try not to just have value cards. Have cards that push people in the direction of the archetype. And as Control is an archetype in Azorius, this seems perfect. Moving over to Rakdos, we have our first Planeswalker of the day, and that's Obnixilis, the Adversary. In my cube, Rakdos is primarily aggressive aristocrats. You want to be swinging through with things and then sacking for value. All of the abilities on Obnixilis go into what the aristocrats deck is trying to do. It comes in and is a sack outlet. We can sack one of the recursive threats, something like Tenacious Underdog, to get a copy of it with starting loyalty equal to the power of the creature that we sacrificed. Having 2 Planeswalkers for 3 mana is going to be good. The +1 can drain them for life or strip them of cards in their hand. The -2 creates a devil that deals more damage to them when they die. And the -7 can either let us draw loads of cards, or if the opponent's on 7, could just kill them. And remember, when you're playing them, you'll have 2 of these. So you could be nugging them for 4 life a turn, or taking 2 cards from their hand, or creating 2 devils, or doing a little bit of each. From a purely archetype-specific point of view, this was the most slammy of slam dunks of any card printed in this set. In terms of cuts, I'm going to try taking out Fireblade Artist. This is a really solid aggressive little creature that also works as a sack outlet. I just personally think that Obnixilis just does that little bit more. I've just found that this card does get a little outclassed if you're not playing it very early in the game. Whereas with Obnixilis, I could see it being strong on turn 3 as well as turn 6 or 7. It just has that little bit extra reach. So there we have it. Those are the few cards from Streets of New Capenna that I'm going to be trying out in my cube. Let me know if there's any ones you think I've missed. Let me know if there's any ones that you've tested and you've had some good success with, or any cards that you've played online that have been really strong. But until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.